Welcome back to the Untangled Mind podcast, where we explore the science and stories behind how we think, feel, and live. I'm Piper Harris, a cognitive behavioral therapist who believes that understanding your brain is the first step to changing your life. Today, we're talking about two senses that have far more influence on your mind than you may realize: taste and smell. These aren't just tools for enjoying food, they're powerful gateways into memory, emotion, and even identity. From childhood meals to unexpected scents that pull you back in time, taste and smell can shape our mood, connect us to our past, and sometimes surprise us with memories we didn't know we still carried. In this episode, we look at the science behind these senses and explore the 10 most powerful ways taste and smell affect the brain, including why some memories make us smile and others stop us in our tracks. So let's dive in. Hello. Hope everyone is doing well today. So today I really want to talk about taste and smell. It's been really top of mind for me recently. Um, it's actually been just this recent weekend. It was funny the other night. I pulled down one of my favorite books and I just was feeling kind of like this mood, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And I turned to one of my very favorite short stories by M.F.K. Fisher, and that's really what brought this to mind, to talk about taste and smell and the brain. And then it was really interesting. Last night we were teasing as a family, talking about my eldest son going to college in just 6 days. It's hard to believe. And we're talking about different foods, and that I hoped that I taught him enough to head off to college and subsist on more than just top ramen. So really, thinking about today's episode and just what's been happening the last couple days. Like I said, I turned to one of my favorite short stories by M.F.K. Fisher. If you don't know who she is, she's just a beautiful writer. I fell in love with her about 15 years ago when I was chefing. Yes, I was also a chef in a previous life. And just her writing, I feel like I'm eating the food with her. I feel like I can see the scene. I just love how she writes. And so I turned to my favorite story. It's called Borderland. And it's actually quite a short story, and it's found, I think, in Serve It Forth. I have a compilation of all of her books called The Art of Eating. But this story, I go back to it so often because she's describing a scene where she and I believe it's her brother have rented a room during like World War II, and it's on the Rhine, near the Rhine. And she talks about outside, she sees soldiers marching past, but inside, she places a tangerine on top of the heater. And she talks about how the skin warms and the smell and the fragrance of it. And then what she does is she then sets it out on the windowsill in the snow. So it almost crystallizes the tangerine. And she talks about the snap of the skin. And it's just a beautiful story. And I talked to my husband about it the other night. I'm like, what is this about this story? Why am I turning to this? And he said, well, she's obviously escaping the impending dread of World War II, and she's using that tangerine as a way to escape something painful. And so then I started thinking to myself, well, what was my driver to go to this story? And I do really think that it is my way of confronting that my little boy is leaving. And it was just, her writing is soothing to me, and it captured what I was trying to do. It really did. But what was really interesting too about M.F.K. Fisher's writing here is that it really is, how we can sometimes look at our trauma, how we can escape our trauma or our anxieties. And so it's just, again, if you've never read M.F.K. Fisher, I cannot suggest her more. The story is called Borderland in her book Serve It Forth. And it's a beautiful short story that it evokes so much emotion in me. I'll read a short little sentence paragraph here that she ends it with. She said, "The sections of tangerine are gone. I can't tell you why they are so magical. Perhaps it is that little shell, thin as one layer of enamel on a Chinese bowl, that crackles so tinnily, so ultimately under your teeth. Or the rush of the cold pulp just after it, or the perfume, I cannot tell. There must be some one, though who knows what I mean, probably everyone knows because of his own secret eatings. I mean, it's just, and again, you have to read her. I love how she wrote that. So that's how today's episode came to be. That, this short story is a perfect example of what neuroscience now confirms. And that is that taste and smell are two of the most powerful forces our brain knows, and they can really transport us instantly across decades, oceans, and entire timelines. I mean, it can thrust me into a timeline that I wasn't even alive for. So these tastes and smells, they can comfort us or they can startle us. And so today we're really going to explore the 10 most powerful ways that taste and smell affect the brain. So to understand why food can have such an impact on memory and emotion, we have to look at how our senses are wired. So, for example, when you smell something, let's say fresh basil, I have some beautiful basil right now. One of my favorite things to make is caprese in the summertime. But if you think about this fresh basil, the odor molecules, when you smell it, travel into your nose and they hit a patch of tissue, and they call this olfactory epithelium. Okay. So from there, they send signals straight into the olfactory bulb. And this is where things get really interesting. That bulb is directly connected to key parts of our brain. Number one, the amygdala. This processes emotions. Oftentimes we call this our fight or flight system, or the alarm system, the fire alarm of our brain. And the second area is the hippocampus. And this is where we store and retrieve memories. Now, what's interesting is this is different from our other senses. So, like sight, sound, and touch, these all actually pass through our brain's relay station. That's called the thalamus. So, before it heads to the destination, so the thalamus just says, okay, sight, go to this area, sound, go to this area. But smell bypasses that relay station entirely. Entirely. So, it goes straight into memory centers and emotional centers. So that's why a smell can hit you like an absolute wave before you even know what's really going on, before you can really digest, like, where's this coming from? Why am I having this? And taste actually works in tandem with smell. So your tongue can detect sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And umami, that's a whole nother conversation there. But most of what we call all of this is flavor is actually smell. Isn't that interesting? So the combination creates this really rich sensory experience that can lock a moment into memory for absolute decades or a lifetime. So for example, I betcha if I say to you, summer storm and pavement, immediately you probably call to mind what the pavement smells like when a flash summer storm hits that hot pavement. Like, I can think of it right now and I can smell it. It's one of my favorite smells. Or I bet if I say to you a box of crayons, right? Did it come to memory? Like, immediately, oh my gosh, I remember what a box of crayons smells like. I'm one of the weird people. I think crayons smell delicious. It's so weird. Okay, so how about a memory of, um, how about a gross one? How about vomit? Did that bring disgust to you? Because all of us remember what it smells like, right? So it's really interesting. This phenomenon actually has a name, and it's called the Proust phenomenon. And it was named after this author, this guy, Marcel Proust. And it's really interesting because he famously described being overwhelmed by childhood memories after tasting a Madeleine cookie and dipping it in his tea. So much like M.F.K. Fisher was talking about these tangerine sections, Proust also explained it as well, and now it's called the Proust phenomenon. So again, when we think about smell and taste, what's fascinating is it just goes directly to our emotion center and our hippocampus. Okay, it completely bypasses the thalamus. So you have to ask yourself, like, why? Why does it do this? Well, if you think about it, when we smell smoke, our brain immediately goes straight to that amygdala, says danger, and gets us out of the way, right? So it really is this kind of safety mechanism. So we smell something, we don't have to wait for the brain to relay, oh, we see fire, now we must go. It's immediate. It's like, I smell smoke. Oh my gosh, I'm in danger. I have to get out. So if you think about that, that's why it's directly connected. And as I'm talking about those kind of examples, think about Hansel and Gretel. Remember that story? And they're going through the woods, and they get caught up, right, with the smell. And I think it was baked bread or something, but and they thought it was safe, right? But then they got into the witch's home. But it does, it drives us toward or away from something much quicker than if we waited for the thalamus to tell our body what to do. So, I really want to dive into the 10 most powerful things that taste and smell can do to the brain. It is very powerful. And I know when I brought up those different ideas or those examples to mind, that you immediately were able to bring those to mind. So, this is why it's so powerful. And I think it's just so fascinating. I love the brain. I'm trying to study it as much as I can. And I love bringing that into the experience of the therapy room. So, this is really an interesting thing for us to look at. So, number one, what happens with taste and smell is it can trigger vivid autobiographical memories. So, some of the strongest, most emotionally charged memories are often involved with smell, always. So, you might smell the sunscreen, right? And immediately, instantly think of childhood summers, or maybe a certain soup, like chicken noodle soup, and you remember your grandma's kitchen, right? So, taste and smell can trigger very vivid autobiographical memories. Number two, taste and smell can regulate our mood. And we know this. This is why aromatherapy is so huge. So, certain smells like lavender, vanilla, or fresh baked bread can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So, just as a reminder, we've got our autonomic system. There's two branches: the sympathetic, which is our fight or flight amygdala, and the parasympathetic, which is our soothing. We can call that like a rest and digest system. It's really not that binary, but that's what we can call it. So, certain smells can actually calm and regulate our mood 100%. So if you were to come into my office, I have a bowl of lifesavers, minty lifesavers. I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, I don't think you have bad breath. But I use these to regulate and to ground in session if somebody becomes really dysregulated. That's why I have them in my office. So, number three, taste and smell can shape our emotional associations. And we've talked a lot about that already. So, when we experience something significant, the smells and tastes present at that time become kind of tagged with emotion. So it can mean that like a joyful holiday meal, you love it even more, and you love that flavor even more for life. But for example, a bad breakup over a certain dish might make you avoid it forever. I'll never forget my godfather. He called one weekend, and I was chatting with him. His name was Hap, and I have such wonderful memories with him as a little girl. But he called one weekend, talked to dad. Dad was his best friend. And he got on the phone with me, and we were preparing to drive over to Montana. I'm from Montana, and go have Thanksgiving with him. Well, see family, but I knew I was going to see Hap. And Hap said to me on the phone call, I will save you a piece of pumpkin pie. We'll eat it together. Well, unfortunately, that never happened. It's one of the last conversations I had with him, and he passed away. He had a massive heart attack. And for years, I'm talking like 15, 20 years, I could not eat pumpkin pie. Couldn't. Because I had such an emotional association with pumpkin pie and losing my godfather. I mean, it took years and years and years for me to break that association of losing my godfather and pumpkin pie. So it really can shape those emotional associations very, very strongly. Number four, obviously, taste and smell influence our food preferences, obviously. And so we have that, earlier exposure plays a huge role in this. So when I was raising my sons, I actually made all of the baby food. And I introduced a lot of different flavors and spices, obviously, when they could manage them with their little tummies, because I didn't want them to have a blunted palate. I wanted my boys to be able to really experience the joy that I have experienced through taste. And so those early exposure moments are huge. So for some parents, you might not have really exposed your kids to a more diverse palate. And you might have some really, really picky eaters at this point, like they're only eating, chicken nuggets and goldfish. And so that can be a real issue, right? If we don't do those early exposures to get their little palate and their mind used to these different flavors, they're going to be pretty picky. So if you were growing up eating certain spices or flavors, your brain wires those tastes as familiar and safe. Okay. So this is why our childhood food culture often stays with us. And that's a big talk right now, right? About the safety of our foods, about all the different dyes, all of that. So really that early exposure is a huge role with how our brain takes in new food and smell experiences. Okay. So number 5, taste and smell can alter pain perception. It can. So comfort foods and pleasant scents, right? They can lower our perceived pain by releasing a little bit more dopamine and some endorphins. So these are your brain's natural painkillers. And it's funny, even hospitals have experimented with scent therapy to help with recovery. And if you know anything about Disney, about Disneyland or Disney World, they have scents all over the place because they're trying to evoke a pleasure in it, right? So there's no pain going on. Well, except I hate crowds, so there is pain. I'm at Disney. Oh, I don't like it. But they're using smell to alter perception, right? So we can do that as well. It's if you've ever sold a home and you've had a realtor say, "Hey, bake some cookies before people come in to the house." You're altering perception. So we can also do that to alter pain perception, and it helps that brain say, "Oh, we're feeling a little bit better." It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Our brain is incredible. So number 6, and this is probably going to be like a duh, it drives cravings and hunger. I know. So again, like the smell of baking cookies can actually make you crave sweets even though you just ate. So that's because smell and taste, they stimulate the hypothalamus also, which helps create or helps regulate hunger signals. So it's just kind of this whole tumult of experiences or pathways that are happening in the brain, and it can drive cravings. There was a really fascinating study, I read it years and years ago, about obese individuals that had impulse control issues. And what they did was they had two different environments, and they were the same kind of fake home base, like it was a kitchen. Okay. One kitchen was very clean and very tidy and had fresh baked cookies on the counter. On the other, they had a very chaotic kitchen, the same kitchen, they made it nasty. They put food everywhere, they garbage everywhere, stuff all over the counters, and the same fresh baked cookies. What's really interesting about this study when they had individuals step into either of these environments is that the cravings and hunger were higher in the chaotic environment than they were over in the organized environment. So it's really interesting, even though the taste and smell was there, they would have one or two cookies in the organized environment, but in the other kitchen, they like binged. They binged eating there. So we see this a lot with people with impulse control issues, especially when it comes to food and taste. You can watch people binge on food, and you can see them like desperately trying to evoke the same emotion centers, but oftentimes they're in a very chaotic environment or their mind is chaotic. So it's really fascinating when you read the research on this. Number 7, it impacts social bonding, excuse me. And we know this, sharing meals and cooking together creates a really strong social connection. Even anthropologists, they believe that this communal eating is really, it played a really key role in human evolution, just meaning that it strengthened group cohesion and it was a protective factor, excuse me. And, even for me, as I'm recording this, I wrote a newsletter and I pulled out some cute little pictures of my boys. And I cooked with them from as young as I can remember. I taught them how to hold a knife, how to respect a knife, because I don't want my boys grabbing something and cutting themselves. I had a lot of sharp knives, especially when I was chefing. I was very busy doing all of that, and I was a private chef. So I was preparing a lot of different meals at home. I wrote a cookbook, all the things. And so I needed to know that they were safe in the kitchen. So I have so many incredible memories of that impact, that social bonding that we did together. And the same thing is with any of my family and friends. We have a good family friend, and every time he visited from my husband's childhood, I would make a giant pan of lasagna. And he would eat it for dinner, and then we'd literally wake up in the morning. He ate another half of the pan in the middle of the night because he loved my lasagna. And then we have another friend. He loves my smashed potatoes, and he can't get enough of them. I literally have to make 3 pounds of them when he comes and visits. So there's that impact of social bonding. I have a best girlfriend from middle school, and we had Rachel's potatoes. Like we still to this day call them Rachel's potatoes. So there's just this impact, right? And we name things for certain people. We have certain memories over foods. It's just really fun. So number 8, and this is where it kind of gets tough with smell and taste, is that it can actually elicit a trauma response. So not all scent and taste-based memories are actually good, and I know that. So for example, a whiff of like diesel fuel might actually trigger a combat veteran's flashback, right? Or the smell of alcohol could really trigger a really hard memory from a childhood that might be full of violence or abuse. So we do know that taste and smell, it's not always good. We know it's not always good, and that it can elicit that trauma response, which makes it very difficult, right? Because we're tasting and smelling all the time. So that can be one of the really difficult things with taste and smell. Number 9, it actually boosts our learning and recall. So if you pair a particular scent, like with a study session, it might help you. Most of the times, it helps you recall the information more easily when you smell it again. So this is actually called context dependent memory. So, for example, when my clients come into the office, they know what it's going to smell like. It might not be the exact scent because I can't ever find enough candles for the exact scent, but they know. Piper, I usually buy the giant 4 wick candles, so it lasts me about 3 months. Well, 2 months. So I know I can get 2 months of sessions with clients so that they're associating the calmness, the soothing in my office with that smell. So even though we might bring up anxious or traumatic discussions, that candle is going to kind of anchor them in the safety that I created before that. So next time that you want to develop a memory, try smell. Try smell. And again, I do this for every one of my sessions. It's very, very important. And number 10, what food does is and food and scent, actually, it's tied deeply to heritage. We know this, right? We know that spices, ingredients, and cooking methods that we grow up become a part of our identity. And that's really how many people stay connected to their roots. And we've already discussed that. So it's important to remember that the brain doesn't just label smell or taste as good or bad, right? It just links it to whatever emotion was present at the time. So, like I said before, that means these sensory triggers can be incredibly healing, but they can also be very unsettling. And that's really something that's important to consider. So, people with PTSD, or just strong traumatic memory, for example, like I said, the the diesel fuel, it can really link back to a very traumatic event, and they're fully back into it in an instant. So it's full of the emotion, the bodily sensations, and those images. And so our job in the therapy room, when we have that association, that memory linked to taste or smell, is to desensitize that negative emotion and scent, because I don't want you walking around unable to do that. So, for example, I am actually working with a client right now in doing this. And so, for example, what I'll do in the therapy room, what I'm doing right now, I have a client that's coming in, and we are actually having the client smell and drink coffee before session because the coffee is linked to a traumatic memory. And so I'm trying to actually invoke the same anxiety and panic and desensitize to that in a safe environment. And that's really what exposure therapy is. So if you're listening, you're like, Piper, there's certain smells and stuff that like I cannot do and I avoid them. What I would say to you is that stop avoiding them. It actually increases the brain's belief that this smell or taste is like the worst thing on planet Earth. Now listen, like my kid, a couple summers ago, we love raw oysters, and he got a really bad raw oyster and threw up for hours. And we just went back to the beach a couple weekends ago, and he's like, I want to try oysters, and he couldn't do it. He's like, oh my gosh, mom, and he spit it out. And I said, okay, you tried one, but you need to keep exposing yourself to oysters because you'll forever be associating getting sick on one oyster for the rest of your life. So exposure really is the way when it comes to taste and smell. And you're like, I don't want to do that. Well, it's highly effective. The more you avoid something, the worse the effects get. So again, I think the brain is so fascinating with taste and smell. I think it's just, I think it's incredible the way that it affects us. We know this, right? So we know that food and smell, it's or food, it's more than fuel. And taste and smell are more than just senses. It's this shortcut that our brain takes to stories that we've lived. Sometimes it's comforting and sometimes it's difficult, but it's always powerful. I love the thought of it. So when M.F.K. Fisher warmed that tangerine on the heater, she wasn't just creating a snack. She was anchoring herself in a moment of safety and beauty in the middle of chaos. And that's the thing about taste and smell. It is not passive. They're these active forces, right? In how we remember, how we feel, and how we connect to who we've been. So the next time a scent or flavor sweeps you away, pay attention. Your brain is telling you a story, and if it's one worth listening to, and if it's something that's very painful, try to step into it because, again, the more we're exposed to the inaccurate formation of a memory around a smell, the more we can go back to enjoying it. So I hope you've enjoyed this today. I just love learning the brain and these 10 powerful ways that taste and smell can affect our brain and the Proust phenomenon. I think it's incredible. If you want to learn more about this, head on over to my blog. I wrote a blog about taste and smell, and you can learn a little bit more if about me and my personal sense of style if you want the newsletter that I wrote with this as well. So thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for joining me for today's episode of the Untangled Mind podcast. I hope this conversation on taste and smell and memory has given you a deeper appreciation for the way your brain stores and retrieves life's most powerful moments. If you found this episode meaningful, I'd love for you to share it with your family or friends or anyone who might appreciate the science and stories about how we experience the world. You can find more insights, resources, workbooks, and future episodes on untangledmind.net. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. So until next time, let's keep on untangling our minds and untangling our lives.